Yeah, I already saw it coming up in the comments of my videos, but the topic really is embarrassing because the British government is coming under renewed pressure because of its plan to deport asylum seekers to Rwanda in the future, regardless of their origin. And as the Observer has now reported, in recent months, several opposition members from the East African country have been granted asylum in Great Britain due to persecution. And London currently wants to declare Rwanda a safe third country by law. Well, the government, I mean. The argument for this may now be more difficult for Prime Minister Rishi Sunak's Conservative government. The Observer referred to Home Office documents in the report, and according to the British government, the planned measure is intended to deter people from crossing the English Channel, though. In the future, people who entered the country irregularly should be able to be brought to Rwanda, which critics accuse of human rights violations, and without them having their asylum application examined in Britain and instead asked for protection there. And there are no plans to return those people to Britain. The plan was declared unlawful by the Supreme Court in mid-November, and Supreme Court justices expressed concerns about the asylum process in Rwanda. It cannot be ruled out that those seeking protection would be deported from there back to their countries of origin. The government in London wants to declare these concerns unfounded by law. The draft bill which will be discussed again in the upper house again, because the House of Lords voted in favor of a motion not to ratify the underlying treaty with Rwanda for the time being. But Sunak had strongly warned the House of Lords, which consists of around 800 mostly appointed members, not to stand in the way of the will of the elected lower house. However, a report recommended that the Rwanda Treaty not be ratified until all security requirements were met. The responsible committee of the upper house approved the report with the votes of members of both major parties, including the Conservatives. Despite the vote, it's widely expected that the House of Lords will ultimately not block the treaty or the law. However, the upper house, which is known to be critical, could delay the planned schedule. And this would make implementation before the next parliamentary election more difficult, at least. Sunak has recently been under pressure because his deportation law did not go far enough for the right wing of the party. They had demanded that appeals at international courts must also be prevented. There should be no loopholes, as they put it. And the government has already paid hundreds of millions of pounds to Rwanda without anyone arriving there. The project is primarily intended to serve as a deterrent, as I said, and the mountainous inland state is just as big as Carinthia and Styria combined, that are parts of Austria, but has around 13 million inhabitants. And the country experienced its darkest hour in 1994 when the members of the Hutu majority murdered an estimated 800,000 to 1 million people from the Tutsi minority within 3 months. The country managed to come to terms with this genocide comparatively well, and an upswing and a success story began, albeit one with flaws. Paul Kagame has been president since 2000, and the former rebel leader has been defense minister and vice president since 1994. International experts credit Kagame with having stabilized the country politically and above all economically. Rwanda has been considered one of the African countries with the highest economic growth rates for 2 decades. However, President Kagame is also accused of increasingly authoritarian leadership, and essential democratic rights are missing in Rwanda. The opposition was kept small through pressure, and freedom of the press is very limited. And human rights violations are also regularly documented. Rwanda came under international pressure primarily because the country was accused of providing military support to the M23 rebel group in the Democratic Republic of Congo. The conflict escalated in 2012 and Rwanda was threatened with sanctions, and the Netherlands cancelled development aid for the country. And the conflict flared up again internationally last year. The Social Democratic Labour Party, which is clearly leading in all polls, announced that it would not pursue the Rwanda plan any further. The Labour Party increased its lead over Prime Minister Rishi Sunak's ruling Conservatives in a recent election poll. And ahead of the general election expected in this year, polling firm Opinion Survey predicted Labour would win 42% of the vote, while the Conservatives would get 27% of the vote. And this increases the gap to 16 percentage points from 14 percentage points in the survey 2 weeks earlier. And the latest poll found that 2/3 of voters see healthcare as the most important issue in Britain. I talked about this in the morning, followed by the economy and immigration. The Tories have been in power in Great Britain since 2010, but that could change soon. In any case, a look at the current survey shows that people in the United Kingdom are longing for change. A serious defeat for the Conservatives seems inevitable, and Prime Minister Rishi Sunak's party is threatened with a debacle at the next election. However, the date for the parliamentary elections has not yet been set, and only one thing is certain so far. Elections will take place no later than January 28th in 2025. The lower house will then be automatically dissolved after 5 years. But in Great Britain, it's common for the British government to set a date in advance. But Sunak wants to take his time with this. An election in October or November is currently considered likely. It is understandable that Sunak does not want to vote until the end of the year. The current polls in Great Britain are indeed absolutely devastating for the incumbent Tory government. Depending on the poll, Keir Starmer's opposition Labour Party is in the lead by between 15 and 25 percentage points, with a 16% asset from the newest one. There are also no signs of a trend reversal so far, and in current polls, the gap between the two major parties in Great Britain remains largely stable. But the popularity of the Labour Party is only one aspect. The threat from the right is also problematic for Prime Minister Rishi Sunak's party. Even if the Reform UK party has little chance of winning seats in the British majority voting system, the first past the post, it's still likely to cost the ruling Tories votes, as a look at the 5 most recent polls shows. There, the right-wing populists sometimes achieve up to 13% of the vote. And in view of the current polls, the opposition in Great Britain is calling for an election in the spring, of course. But Sunak doesn't want to know anything about it yet. In an analysis, the Times listed the reason for this. And the government also hopes for a better economic situation, shorter waiting lists for the health service, and reduced migration. And inflation could also fall further, although it's rising at the moment. But in any case, the current polls are currently the best reason for the British Prime Minister to push the election date as far back as possible. And if you want to know more, the next video is right here in the end screen. I'll see you there. I'll be back.